All right, good morning. We're looking at the morning of June 22nd, and we're going to kind of finish up what we started yesterday, which was making a login system. And when you log in a user or register a user, you want to basically save their session with a token. And so, kind of just a quick high level overview of what we did yesterday. We made this database module where we can register a new user and basically save them to the database. If they already exist, then we kind of say, hey, you can't register a user that already exists. Otherwise, insert one new user. And inside of our new route, we made a route to /register a user. And we basically get our user from the front end, from the request object coming from the client. They're going to post a bunch of data in the body of the request object, and we're going to generate an ID, and we're going to take that information and a created date object. We're going to hash their password. So we're going to, whatever password is in clear text, we take that password, put it through bcrypt, hash it to encrypt it, and we put it through 10 salt rounds as a way to make the hash harder to essentially hack. And then we register the user, which was the function that we made over here, register user, and stored in DB result. And at that point, we've inserted a new user. We then create an auth token and a cookie. And so, we kind of went into this yesterday. You create a cookie to basically store your session information on the client, so that you can persist a session with the server. So the server essentially knows who you are, but you really, the problem with cookies is they're easy to modify. They're in clear text, and front end. It's on the front end, so it's not considered secure. So you use a token. And the thing about a token, if you ever look at a token, and we have, tokens are hashed. So you make this what's called a token, which is now encrypting your payload, if you will. You then put the token inside of the cookie, and then you can use that cookie to basically reopen up a session. And so you don't have to, one thing that was a learning thing for me is I thought, well, hey, if I'm thinking about this, do you have to store the username and the password in the cookie? And the answer is no. Once you validate, once you successfully register, I need to put this in side of a success block. If it's successful, then we can create an auth token, because right now we're not using this DB result. But essentially, if you register successfully, then you can create that auth token. You don't then need to re-provide a username and password with the server. So if you actually go into this auth token and you look at your payload, you can get an ID and an email and some role information, but you actually don't have to store the user ID and the password to recreate the session. Okay. So this is the payload. You're just saying, hey, this is my user ID, this is my email, this is role, but now this payload will be encrypted when you use this JWT.sign. And so this auth token is basically an encryption string of letters and text. Okay, then you put the token in the cookie, and that's kind of where we are now. When we register a new user, again, I need to basically say if DB result is truthy, then we issue the auth. Then we go through and we do that. Now, so let me kind of pause because this isn't exactly what you need. I believe there's a property like insert count or something along those lines. Let me look up that real quick. Okay, and so when you looked at DB result, I put DB result in a debug statement, and it gave me this object with insert ID and acknowledged. So acknowledged is true, meaning this register user came back with an acknowledged property of true. So I just said DB result.acknowledged. So basically, if the acknowledged is true, meaning the insert worked, then we generate our auth token and we issue a cookie, put the auth token in the cookie, and then res dot status 200 with our information. That allowed me to create a new user with a user ID here and an auth token again that's this encrypted string. So that's the point that I was looking to get to. Otherwise, we'll do something like res status 400. Just give them a generic error message here. So just cleaning a little bit up from yesterday. So that's all working in a working state at the moment. And there's register. We also made a login route where we get the email address and the password from rec.body. Now I just created this EA Gudmestead with today's date 6/22 at rankin.edu with the password of password. Okay, so we're going to test that against the login route, which, by the way, I did have to recreate my .env environment variables today. I'm on a different computer, so I had to recreate that. I did that yesterday because basically it wasn't finding my auth secret. My auth secret was not defined, and if you kind of go into development JSON, auth secret is empty here. And if you go here, it says, hey, look in the .env, the auth secret. So I had to create that here to get that linked up. Anywho, so get the username and password. Look a user up by their email address. So the email address that's provided. If that's truthy, in other words, this user comes back, and the password matches the hashed password, the plain text password matches the hash password stored in the database using this compare. Then we go ahead and issue a token there and issue a cookie, and we say welcome back user, otherwise email or password incorrect. And so now I should be able to login user, and I don't have my route saved. I must have not saved that yesterday, so let's go ahead and new. This is a post to the /login. Localhost 5000 API users login. It's looking for an email address and a password. I set my password to password. If I click send, welcome back with my auth token. And if I put in a bad password, email or password were incorrect. And again, you can kind of click on here and see that there is a cookie created called auth token, but everything in there is encrypted, which is the point of using a token. And you can click on cookies here and see the auth token. Now, once we get to the front end, we can actually use that cookie plugin, which is kind of cool to just see what kind of cookies are on all these different sites anyways. Refresh my users. I should see my one user in there. There we go. And the login is working with the cookie. Okay, so that's where we left off yesterday. So we got that up and running. What's left is doing an update. So we're going to allow a user to update their, maybe update their password, for example. You know, a lot of times an email address is unique, and so you really don't want users to update their email. Maybe you do. Just saying, sometimes their email address is what they use to log in, so got to think about that one. And delete a user. So let's write the logic to update a user. So connect to the database. And users collection. Update one method. 2 arguments. First one is your find. So we're going to find the underscore ID, $ equals user ID that's passed in. Now, that user ID will have gone through our valid ID middleware, so it'll be an object ID. So that's good. And then we're going to set, and we're just going to spread our updated user. And so all the properties and fields that you send in. And we're going to add the last updated field to a new date object. And so this is letting them update any field, including their email address. And let's go ahead and export that method. Now on the users, we just brought in the whole module. DB module from database. So we don't have to import that function. Now the routes. Let's kind of scroll down here. I'm going to make a route to update a user by their ID. Now, there's actually, when you think about it, updating, there's 2 updates. There's actually 2 routes we're going to make. We're going to make an admin update route. And so this would be an administrator. They can update any other user. And so it would be someone with those credentials to have the permissions, and we're going to get into permissions soon. An admin with permissions to update any other user's credentials. We're going to do another. And I'm going to have to put this above router.post, which would be, this would be considered the self-service. And so this would be a user updating themselves. And so when a user wants to update their own account, you would navigate to /me. When an admin wants to update someone else, you just provide the user ID. And so we're going to actually code both of those up. Might have some middleware in there as well. And so let's just res.json self-service route hit, and this is the admin update route hit. Okay, so let's save. This will be the user login that is saved to my dog walker app. And let's do a post request. API users me. Self-service route hit. And then if I pull out my user ID, so I'm going to save this. Self-service update route, and this is a post. $5,000 API users /ID, and user ID was not a valid object ID, so let's see. Thought I converted that. So there's user ID going into valid ID. Let's pull the ID out of the database, make sure we got the right ID. Ends in 33. Let's see, doesn't end in 33. Might have missed a character. Okay, so this would be the admin route, admin update route. Okay. Okay, so now that we got those routes kind of going, I'm going to flush out the self-service update as we continue a little bit later. And we'll get into the reasoning why that is, but I'll come back to this one. For now, we're just going to do the admin update route. And so we got a valid ID, we're testing that, and we're not just going to respond right away. Let's put all this in try catch. we gotta send in the user ID and updated user object. So the user ID is stored in the request object because of our middleware. And then we'll say updated user. Of course, we need to get our updated user from rec.body. So let's debug user router db results. See what property we need to check. If db results is truthy, there's a property we're going to need to throw in there. Then we'll just res.json So here's our admin route, and right now we'll just update the role, and we might need to only accept a valid update, so we'll get a little joy schema going here. Kind of start with all this. None of it's required. They're all optional fields. But we'll at least make sure that there's a password. If there's a password, that it's 5. If there's a role, it's one of those roles. So now we can go back down here. Valid body, pass in the update user schema. And so right now, my role is developer, but let's update that to quality analyst. So if I go to admin route update body here, let's see, email, password. Now the thing about doing an update on the password is we got to make sure that it stays hashed, and so we will we'll have to write a little bit more logic here to make sure that hash, that we don't put a plain text password into the database role. So let's update role to quality analyst. See what breaks. User not updated. And so user router undefined. And so my DB result is coming back undefined. Let's troubleshoot this. Okay, so this update one method should return some data. And so I think it might be here and here that it's not working, whether it's a user ID or something's not working. I think it is our database query. And so I'm going to add the keyword return because I did throw in our debug and I'm getting an object ID and I'm getting a role of quality analyst. So the data is kind of coming in how I would expect. But I did notice that my function to update one user is not returning any data. So now, if I hit that, it just wasn't returning the object. And so now it's returning the object. And there we go. So now acknowledges true, modified count is 1. So you could kind of come back into here and set the modified count, which is nice to do. So if I say if db results dot modified count double equals 1, and then we say the user is updated. But going back in here, currently the role says developer. If I refresh, role of quality analyst, and a last updated with that date, which is what I'm looking for. Take out my debugs. We're going to be adding to this as we get into it, but just as a starting point, again, we'll come back to this. So let's do a little bit more testing. What if I forget the T? Should get joy validation, which is good. Password, okay, good. Okay, so updated user should have a password. If updated user has a password that's updated, we need to hash it. And so we'll update updated user dot password equal to await bcrypt hash updated user password and the number of salt rounds, which before we were just hard coding 10 salt rounds, but could be a little bit better to get that kind of information out of your source code and into a .env, kind of store that out. So here's issue auth token. Let's see, getting our register. That's where I need to look. See, we just hard coded 10, so we're hashing our password with 10 salt rounds. But we did save it in .env, and so we could do a config.get auth.salt round, ROUN. There we go. Auth.salt rounds. And so let's go back here, and in the second argument we do config.get auth.salt rounds, like that. That should be 10. And let me double check my salt capital R, so that looks good. Salt capital R. So let's check out the password, right? So here we're updating our user, and right now my password is password, and that'll welcome me back. And so let's update our password to password 1. Invalid salt. Okay. So let's troubleshoot that. Number of rounds. Oh, I'm going to have to parse it to an int. That's what it is. So let's do a parse int. Might be coming back as a string. And so there we go. Now it says user ID updated. So my password should now be password 1. If I hit that, email or password incorrect, password 1. Welcome back, auth token. Bingo. So yeah, the big thing there is taking the input from the user, which is stored in this object, updated user. It's going to be plain text, so we update that property to be a hashed password before we update the user. And that really leaves one more operation, which is delete one user. Before we move into the next conversation, now that we have a login, saving everything in a cookie and a token, then we move on to some authentication. So delete one user by its ID. So let's write that logic. Okay, now, kind of mentioned this before, but do you really want to delete your users or just let them disable their accounts? Just, I suppose it depends on, it depends. Like so many things in life. Delete one. And we're going to pass in the user ID. So we're going to say delete one, where the user underscore ID $ equals user ID. And back to here, we'll make a route. Router.delete. What do we call that? Delete one user. Let's export the function. That wasn't coming up in my IntelliSense. Now, delete one user, pass in rec.userid. If db result And if I use this as my modified count, if db results modified count is 1, res status 200 JSON. Let's say status is 400. User not deleted. Okay, let's give it a whirl. So here's my user. Let's go ahead and do a delete. And grab my object ID. Okay, not deleted. Let's see if that is true. Okay, it deleted, but it must not be modified count. My if statement worked, so let's go ahead and create a new user because my user's gone. Register new user. Let's grab the user ID and delete the user. And let's just go back to making this if db result debug user router db result. Paste in that ID. Let's take a look at, oh, I have to await. Again, let's create a user, register new user, because he should have been deleted. User ID of this, copy. Now we can look at the acknowledged is true, deleted count. If db result dot deleted count is 1, now we should be getting the correct output. Register new user, send. There's my ID. Go to my delete route, paste the ID, send, and the user is deleted. Bingo. Let's save, delete user. Now we can comment that out, just delete it. Okay, this is where I wanted to get to at the end of yesterday. So we are, we've done the CRUD operations now with user accounts, and I'll stop this video here. I should be able to get one more video in introducing some authentication. So that's coming next.